Alhamdulillah wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Today, inshallah, our class will be about solving quadratic equations. What we mean by quadratic equation and how to solve it. Quadratic equations are, quad. What is quad means in Latin? It is coming from quad. It means square. So quadratic equation, it is about polynomials of second degree. We will see how to solve them by factoring, by completing the square, and by using the quadratic formula. At the end, we will study the discriminant. It is the factor that will help us to find or to decide about how many solutions and what is the type of these solutions. Let's start with the quadratic equation. The quadratic equation, it is a second degree. You can look here at the right-hand side. It is a second degree polynomial. So you can call it quadratic equation or a second degree equation. It has this form. This is the standard form of the quadratic equation. A is not zero. If A is zero, of course, the variable here is X, A and B and C are real numbers. A is not zero. If it is zero, it will not be quadratic. And there is another reason, we will see it later, why it cannot be zero. But it is clearly will be linear if A is zero. Now, how to solve it? To be able to solve the quadratic equation, the first method that you should always think about it is factoring. If you can solve by factoring, this will be so nice. Before solving by factoring, you need to be aware about this property, the zero product property or the zero factor property. What does this property says? It says what? The product of two factors, the product of two quantities is zero if and only if one of them is or both, by the way, but it will be already included. So be careful. This property works only if the right-hand side is what? It doesn't work with other numbers. This is why we call it the zero product property. Like let's solve this example and let me tell you about this mistake that I know that many of you they will do. I hope no, but look here what we can do to solve this equation. Take X as a common factor. What is the problem if I take X as a common factor?
No benefit there.
Is it good?
No.
Is it wrong? Is it false?
No.
It is not false, but it is useless. What is the benefit of that? Now, look at the mistake that some of you they will do in the quiz, in the next quiz. They will say that X is 24 or X plus 5 is 24. Is that correct?
No.
The product, if the product of two numbers is 24, is one of them must be 24? No. So this is wrong. Don't do this trick or don't use this property unless the right-hand side is zero. Be careful about this. So to solve this equation, what we need to do? We need to write it in this form, in the standard form. So we will eliminate the right-hand side. We will make it zero. So we will add negative 24 for both sides or subtract 24 from both sides. Now what we will do? We will try to factor the left-hand side. We need two numbers. The product of them is negative 24 and the sum of them is 5. X minus 3 times X plus 8. Now the right-hand side is what? So two numbers or two factors, the product of them is zero, then one of them must be zero or both of them are zeros. Now we have two linear equations, X equals to 3 or X equals to negative 8. You can check always your solutions by checking the original equation. The second method, if you cannot factor, what you can do? So method number one to solve any quadratic equation is to factor. If you cannot factor, use the quadratic formula. What is the quadratic formula? From where it comes? It comes from completing the square. So let's see what is completing the square. But it is not necessary to use completing square if you want to solve. We will see that together by the end of this class. So now how to complete the square? You remember that from 1.2, from the equation of the circle, do you remember? You need to add the square of the half of the coefficient of x. But before that, you need, of course, to have it in this form. The coefficient of x squared must be equals to positive 1. So if you add the square of the half of the coefficient of x, you will get a perfect square. Here you have 4 examples, 4 expressions. Here, what you need to add, and here how it will be a perfect square after completing the square. In the next slide, we have, let's call it the algorithm of completing the square. The process, the steps, the guidelines, how to complete the square if you want to solve the quadratic equation by completing the square. Step number 1, if a is not 1, if the coefficient of x squared is not 1, divide both sides by what? By a. Now, if it is 1, after it becomes 1, rewrite the equation so that the constant term is alone on one side. What does that mean? After dividing by a, this will be c over a. Move it to the right-hand side. Then, in step number 3, square the half of the coefficient of x and add it to both sides. Step number 4, factor the resulting trinomial as a perfect square and combine terms on the another side. The last property or the last step, use the square root property. What is the square root property? When you take the square root of both sides, as we will see. Let's take an example. It will be much easier if we have an example. Now let's solve this by completing the square. Okay, let's solve it in general. Can you factor? You don't need to go to any method if you can factor. You cannot find, of course, 2 integers, the product of them is positive 13 and the sum of them is negative 8. So in this case, you need to follow this process. What is step number 1? Is the coefficient of x squared is 1? Yes. Positive 1, not only 1. Even if it is negative 1, you have to divide both sides by negative 1. So x squared, it is positive 1. Good. We will go to step number 2. What we will do in step number 2? We will add negative 13 for both sides. Then we will ask ourselves, what is the coefficient of x? Negative 8. The half of it, negative 4. Square it. Add 16 for both sides. Next, the left-hand side, we should factor it as a perfect square and combine the terms on the right-hand side. Here we are. Now, the last step is what? Use the square root property. I know, believe it or not, there are some students, when they are here, they expand. What will happen if you expand? You will go back. So try doing that. Avoid doing this. Try to avoid that. So what you need here to do, just take the square root of both. And what you will get here? The absolute value of x minus 4 equals to what? Square root of 3. Which means that what? X minus 4 is what? Positive or negative square root of? Usually we go from this step to this step, as you can see here clearly. But if it is not clear for you, it is better. I advise you to use the square root of both sides, the absolute value, and so on. Now, this is a linear equation. How to solve it for x? Just add 4 for both sides. Now we have 2 solutions. Can you see that there are 2? Yes. Now, what we are going to play on, are they both positive or negative? Both are positive, clearly. 4 plus square root of 3 or 4 minus square root of 3, both are positive. Real or not real? Rational or irrational? Irrational. So you have to know that. Now for this equation, how to solve this equation by completing the square? First of all, you should have the coefficient of x squared equals to 1. So we will divide both sides by 3. So it will be x squared minus 4x plus 2 equals to 0. Next, move negative 2 to the right hand side. Then add 4 for both sides. Why 4? Because it is the square of the half of the coefficient of x. Then the left hand side will be perfect square and the right hand side will be 2. Here it is. Now take the square root of both sides. What you will get? X minus 2 will be positive or negative square root of 2.
Add 2 for both sides.
Add 2 for both sides. Here we are. Again, we have two positive irrational numbers, solutions, roots, zeros. So what we learned so far, ya shabab, we can solve quadratic equation by factoring or by completing. But completing square, in fact, it is the method of obtaining what is called the quadratic formula. So in fact, the main method is what? Factor if you can solve by factoring, or use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula comes from where? It comes from using, before that, let me give you this, remind you about when completing the square, make sure that the coefficient of x squared is positive 1. Now, how to complete the square in general? Let's try completing the square for the general form of the equation. What we will do?
Subtract C for both sides.
No. Step number 1. Divide both sides by A. A is not 0. And if it is not 1, this is what we will do. Divide both sides by A. Next, step number 2. Step number 3. What is the coefficient of x? B over A. What is the half of B over A? B over A is B over A. The half of it, or the half of it, multiply by a half. Square it. B squared over 4A squared. So you will add this for both sides. Next, simplify this. Combine the terms here. You have here two fractions. What is the LCD? 4A squared. So you will multiply. You will multiply here. By the way, here also in the left-hand side, it should be mentioned here. In the left-hand side, here we have what? Perfect square. The square root of this is x. The middle sign is plus, and this is b over 2a, the square root of this. So here we are. This is the left-hand side. Here you need to combine. Again, you will make it a single fraction over the LCD, which is 4a squared. Simplify more. Here we are. Next, what we will do? Take the square root of both sides. So you will get that x plus b over 2a is what? Positive or negative, the square root of this. You can distribute the square root over the quotient. So it will be the square root of the numerator over the square root of the denominator. And of course, here, it will be 2a. Whether a is positive or negative. Because here we have what? Positive or negative. In fact, the square root of a squared, it is the absolute value of a. Which is what, by the way? It is positive or negative a at the end. It depends on a if it is positive or negative. Good. So you can here discuss two cases, when a is positive, when a is negative. But here we combine them together. Next, what we will do?
Subtract.
We will subtract b over 2a from both sides. What is this?
Quadratic formula.
This is the quadratic formula. So do we need to complete the square? No. Just if we complete the square, we will get the quadratic formula at the end. So just factor if you can factor. If you cannot factor, use the quadratic formula. And you can now see clearly why a cannot be 0, because it is in the denominator. If it is 0, it will be undefined. There is no solution in this case. So from the beginning, this is formula for solving quadratic equation. If a is 0, it is not quadratic equation from the beginning. Find all the real solutions of each equation. How to find this? I advise you to factor. If you cannot factor, by the way, Shabab, this works always. For any quadratic equation, you can use it. But the calculations, they are more when you apply the quadratic formula. I advise you to factor if you can factor. If you cannot, go to the quadratic formula. Here we cannot factor. It looks like that. So let's go to the quadratic formula. Just you need to know what is A, what is B, and don't forget the negative signs. Some of you, they said B is 5. B is not 5. It is negative 5. So this is B, this is A, this is C, and that's it. Now just a matter of substitution. Be careful when you square, when you multiply here, like here, negative multiply by negative. And this is what you will get at the end. We have here what here? Two different real solutions. Both are complex, both are irrational. Now for this equation, Again, you can find what is A, what is B, what is C. This is A, this is B, this is C. Substitute. Notice here what happens, that what is inside this root becomes 0. So this is why we don't have radical here. It becomes negative 12 over 8, which is negative 3 over 2. And we have one solution. This is not expected, ya shabab, not expected. Because we have a second degree polynomial. So it has 2 zeros. Yes?
So the answer is the equation tangent to x-axis in this form.
Oh, this is so far. This is in chapter 3. You are 2 chapters before us. Yes, we will mention that in chapter 3. Now, this is about the graph of this polynomial. Anyway, in this case, we will say that it has one real solution or 2 equal solutions, in fact. It is just one solution, but repeated twice. Or there are 2 solutions, but they are equal to each other. We will see that. I will come back to this example when we see how many solutions, what is the sum and the difference and the product of solutions. By the way, it wasn't necessary here, by the way, to use the quadratic formula because we can factor this. Do you know? Look here, we have negative, positive, square root 12 squared, negative. But if you factor from the beginning, look how it is easy. Look at the right-hand side, the left-hand side. It is perfect square. So just it is 2x plus 3 all squared. Take the square root of both sides. You will get 2x plus 3 equals to positive or negative 0, which is 0. X equals to negative 3 over 2. No calculations, no squares, no positive, no negative. So easy. So always try to factor. Can you factor here?
No.
There is no integers, 2 integers. The product of them is 2 and the sum of them is 2. So now complete. Why should I complete the square? I will use the quadratic formula. If I complete the square, I will get the quadratic formula at the end. But no problem. If you want to complete the square, you can do that. Why not? But it is shorter to use the quadratic formula. We have here a strange case here. The square root, what is inside the square root is negative. So look, what is the solution? Is it real?
No.
So he asks at the beginning for the real solution. So what you will say? It has no real solution because this square root of -1 is undefined in the real number system. In fact, this is I. We will see that in 1.5. This is 1 plus I, -1 plus or minus I. But at this moment, we will say that it has no real solutions. Now, do you notice something, guys? What happens when this quantity inside the radical is negative? What happens? No real solution. When it was 0, when this was 0, what happened? One solution. Or 2 repeated, 2 equal. And when it was positive, 2 real solutions, 2 different real solutions. This quantity inside this square root, it is so important. What is it? What is it? What was inside here? B squared minus 4AC. This quantity, it is called the discriminant. The discriminant. The discriminant, it helps us to determine how many solutions we have. And what is the type of these solutions? Are they real or not real? So the discriminant of this quadratic equation, it is B squared, let's denote it shortly by D, the letter D. B squared minus 4AC. If it is positive, then the equation has 2 distinct. This is stronger than different. It has 2 distinct real solutions. If it is 0, it has exactly 1 real or 2 equal real solutions. If it is negative, it has no real. It has, in fact, 2 non-real complex solutions. Okay. Now, let's apply this for these equations. No need to solve. This is what is good about the discriminant. Without solving, you can know if they are real or not. They are 1 or 2. So use the discriminant to determine how many real solutions for each equation. For this one, all what you need to do, just find B squared minus 4AC. Here it is. Whatever it is greater than what?
0.
20 or 10 or 30, it doesn't matter. Just it is greater than 0. Since the discriminant is positive, this equation has what?
Two different solutions.
Two distinct real solutions. Great. Now for the second one, this is the discriminant square of b. Don't do mistake when you determine what is b. B here is negative 12, not 12. And of course here that it will be squared here anyway. Negative for AC, it is 0. So this equation has one repeated solution, one real solution, or two equal solutions. For this one, the discriminant is negative. So it has no real solution. It has two complex solutions. Now, let me go back here and ask you, if I ask you here to find the sum of the solutions of this equation, what will be the sum? Because we have seen here that it has only one real solution, that is x equals to negative 3/2. Keep it in mind. Keep it in mind.
It's the same.
We will see. We will see.
The sum is the same.
Just wait, ya shabab. Just wait for this slide here. Now we know from the discriminant, we can know how many solutions and what they are. Are they real or not? Now, from what we are going to do in this slide, we can know what is the sum and the product of the solutions without solving the equation. How to do that? In general, if this is the quadratic equation that we have, this is our quadratic equation, and it has two solutions. You know that from the quadratic formula, it is plus or minus.
Yeah.
So take the positive, the one with positive, and call it x1, solution number 1, and use the second one with negative and call it solution number. So these are the two solutions that we have. Now, what is x1 plus x2? What is x1 plus x2? If you add, they have the same denominator, which is 2a. Now, when you add negative b plus negative b, it will be negative 2b over 2a. And plus square root minus the same square root, 0. So it will be plus 0. Simplify. What is that? Negative b over a. What is that? What is that for the equation? What is b? What is a? So the sum is the negative of the coefficient of x over the coefficient of. Here we are. The sum of the solutions of the quadratic equation, they are just the negative of the coefficient of x over the coefficient of x squared. Now for the product, if you multiply them, what will happen? If you multiply x1 by x2, what you will get?
B all squared.
It will be, if you multiply this by this, multiply them. Numerator by numerator, denominator by denominator. If we multiply the denominators first, which they are easier, we will have 4a squared, right?
Yes.
Now, if you multiply here, you can notice clearly that they are a conjugate of each other. They are conjugate, so we will get difference of 2 squares. If you can think about it. Negative b times negative b, it will be negative b squared. B squared. Minus, when you square the square root, it will come and you will have b squared minus 4ac. Simplify, b squared minus b squared, 0. Negative times negative positive, 4ac over 4a squared. What is that? 4 over 4 is 1, and we will have c over. What is that? The constant term over the coefficient of x squared. So you don't need to solve or to use the quadratic formula to find the product of the solutions. Just divide the constant term by the coefficient of x squared. Not only that, what is interesting is coming now. Ya Shabab, this is trinomial, right or not? How we usually factor such trinomials? If it is, let's take the easier case when the coefficient of x squared is 1. When you have x squared plus a number here, whatever, x plus another number here, whatever this number is. So let's say for simplicity, here we said if we divide by a, c over a, and c over a. If we divide by a, both sides. Now, usually, let me give you an example. X squared minus, let's say 5x plus 6 equals to 0. What we are looking here, if you want to factor this, you will look for two numbers. The product of them is 6, and the sum of them is negative. So what they are? -2 and negative. Now it is in general the same. This is the product. This is the product here, and here is what? Negative the sum. If we have here negative, it will be the sum. If it is without negative, it is negative the sum. So let me write here negative, for example. Negative b here. This will be the sum. If it is plus, it will be negative the sum. And this is exactly what we have. In fact, any quadratic equation, if you divide both sides by the coefficient of x squared, you will get here the product and here negative the sum. And according to that, you can factor it as x times x minus 1. If you expand this one, you will get this one. We relate now P6 with 1.4. And you can take this or apply this trick for many problems. But now everything will be easier. Let's go back now to the question that you didn't agree about. Now here, for example, these solutions, this equation, it has no real. It has no real. But we can know what is their sum, what is their product, even without knowing what they are. What is the sum of the solutions here? It will be negative b over a. So it will be negative what? Negative 2 over third. What is it? The sum of the solution is 6. Even we don't know what are the solutions. Now, what about the one that we disagreed about? This one. This one. It was only one solution. What is the sum of the solutions according to this rule? Look at this. It will be negative 12 over, which is what? How the sum of the solutions is negative 3 while it is only one solution? This is why we said there are two equal solutions or one repeated. So in fact, it is negative 3 over 2 plus negative 3 over 2, which is what? Negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. Now I think we are agreed about that. Okay, now we are ready to go and practice. That's it, ya shabab. I think we can solve. We have here an interesting recitation question. I will give you 1 minute. I think it is more than enough to solve this. So easy. This is question number 4 in the recitation, part A. He gave you here the sum and the product of the solutions, the two roots. Roots means zeros, solutions of this equation. Then what is B and C? Let me, I respectively, it means on order. This means what? You have here the sum and what? And here you have two numbers. So which one of them is the sum? The first one. What is mentioned here? It is the one that is mentioned here. What is mentioned here first? It is the one that is mentioned here first. What is mentioned second is the second. This is the meaning of respectively, in order, with the same order. Let me go, Shabab, to the summary. Before I will go back to this question at the end. This is the summary of this section. All what you need to have from here. And look how many solved exercises and interesting ones, by the way. Some students, ya Shabab, they asked me when they were preparing for major 1, they were asking me, is it enough to just get to use the slides? Is it enough? I usually ask them, do you have enough time to finish or to study all what you have in the slides? Because you can see, ya Shabab, here there are many types of examples, solved exercises from the textbook, recitation, all the exams. If you can have enough time to solve and practice all of these, I think it is more than enough. For example, this is a solved exercise, and it is interesting one, how to solve quadratic equations when you have several variables. You need to solve it for one specific variable from these several variables. Look at this one, for example. If you want to solve it for d is squared, so it will be quadratic. And it is easy, just multiply both sides by 4, divide by, and take the square root, then rationalize. Look at this. Who can help me to solve b? How to solve b for t? If it is for s, it is easy, or for r, it is easy because it will be linear. But when you want to solve it for t, it is what? Quadratic, because t is squared. How to solve it, Shabab? What about taking t as a common factor? Is it okay? It is not false, but it is useless. So what you need to do, you need to write it in the standard form that we usually have. Eliminate the right hand side like this. Now this is your variable that you want to solve for. This will be A, this is B, this is what? C. Determine them and use what? The quadratic form. And simplify. You need here, of course, to simplify. These are some exercises from your textbook. Usually, ya Shabab, the first slide or the first two slides are easy for you to practice, to warm up. But you will find interesting questions. Usually, the last questions that I bring for you from the textbook, there are many tricks in such questions. So you can practice by solving them also. I will come back to this. Where is the question that we were trying to get? This one. Try to solve this one. You already done. Excellent. Good. So who can tell me what is B? B, tell me what is it? No, negative 1.2. Great. You use the calculator. Why it is decimal number?
Negative 40 over 7.
Simplify it. No.
9 over 10.
B is no. This it is good. I know. No need. But
Because you
yes, you are right. It is negative 1.2. But I was wondering how you obtain that.
you will divide the 0.9 over 3 and the last step.
So your colleague, he said it is negative 6 over 5, and it's okay. You are right. Both answers are okay.
Okay, but because I was right.
Yes, I was wondering how he obtained the decimal. Yes.
Because I have made the scissor method and then divided by 3, so it came because the A was written in number, so the answer.
But of course, the sum is not. You can see that the sum is written in not in that form.
Just make 4 over 3 equal.
Let's see together from where we can obtain that. Look, this is B, this is C. You can check now your answer. Now let's see what we have. What is the sum?
Negative B over
The sum
A.
equals to what? 4 over 3. This is what is given for me. But I know from the sum, what is the sum? The sum is negative B over A. Negative the coefficient of X. What is the coefficient of X? B. What is the coefficient of X squared? 0.9 equals to 4 over 3. Now, this is not 1.4 anymore. This is B8, linear equation. Solve it for B. What you will do? You will multiply both sides by what? By negative 0.9. So multiply both sides by negative 0.9. This is 4 over 3.
Make the 0.9 fraction.
And for me, this is why I was wondering how you obtain that quickly, mashallah. But for me, I usually what I do, negative 9 over 10 multiplied by 4 over 3. It will be much easier for me to avoid using any calculator or any decimal numbers, but it's okay. You can use whatever is suitable for you. Now I will do what? 3 over itself is 1. Negative 9 over 3, it is negative 1. 4 over 2 is 2. 10 is 5. Negative 3. Why I did this mistake, by the way, 2 times maybe today. Okay, this is equals to what? Negative 6 over 5.
You can multiply by 2.
Yes, you can do, of course.
So it will be 0.3.
Yes, 0.9 over 3, it is 0.3. 0.3 multiplied by 4, it is. Yes. Yes, you can. I can see. Now for the product, it is equals to what? 1. This is what is given. What is the product from the formula? It is C over A. C, the constant term, which is C, over the coefficient of X squared. You should understand it, not only C and B and A, like that. The constant term over the coefficient of X squared, which is C over 0.9, which means that C is 0.9 multiplied by 1, which is what? 0.9. Okay, which is 9/10. You can write it that way. Great. Let's go back, guys, to what? I'll go back to this question. Let's solve this. I told you before that to solve a quadratic equation, use what first? Factoring. If it doesn't work, you can go to the quadratic formula. But in some questions, you have to use completing square. Okay, like this question, even if it is not mentioned. So let me say that without this. If he said that if this equation is written in this form, then what is a and b? What is a and b squared? What is whatever? You will how can you go from here to here? Completing square, even if it is not mentioned. But here it is of course much easier when you know what you should do. So when completing the square, this means complete the square. Solve it. During that, I will pause the recording and distribute the papers of class test number 1. So the answer is A. Sure?
Yes.
Let's see. It is A. Why it is A? What you should do in this case?
Distributive for x.
So this is similar to the question that you have in major exam 1. Do you remember for the circle?
Yes.
So now what we can do, remember that here you don't need to solve. It is not about solving this question. It is about just writing this in this form. This is what we want to get at the end. So what we will do, we will distribute. Then we will divide both sides by what?
4.
By 4. This is the algorithm of completing the square, 7/4. Now we will add the coefficient of x is -2, the half of it is -1, square it is 1. So you will add 1 for both sides. Now here in the left hand side we have a perfect square, and on the right side we have 7, 11/4. Now by using the square root property, square both sides, what you will get?
Don't need that.
X. Aha, this is usually what you do.
No.
You continue solving. Remember, you don't need to solve. Just stop here. So you can, of course, if you want to solve, you can continue. But this is not about solving. Just he said, when completing the square, stop when you have something like this. X plus something equals all squared equals to something else. So now just compare between this and between this. According to the just visual comparison, what you will have here?
A is equal
Brackets,
to
brackets, x, -1 and positive a. So a is what?
-1.
A is -1. And equals b is what? 11/4. Now what is it about? Is it a plus b?
No.
It is a plus b squared. So it is -1 plus 121/16, which is -6 plus 121/16, which is what? 105/16. Right? Let's go back to exercise number 1. We still have time, I think, for that. State the number of distinct solutions of this equation. How to know? State the number of distinct solutions of this equation. How to know how many solutions?
Is a discriminant.
We will use the discriminant. So what is d in this case? D is b squared. So you need to see what is a. A is square root of 7. What is b? 6. What is c? Negative square root of 7. D will be what? B squared minus 4ac. So it is what? 36 minus 4. Let's say I want you to get used to do it step by step. So it is 6 all squared minus 4 times a times -7, square root of 7, which is c. This will be equals to what? 36 minus negative times negative, it will be positive. 7 times 7 under the square root, it will be 7. Square root of 7 times square root of 7 is 7 times 4, 28, which is what? 64. Now, greater than 0. So what? So it has 2. The number of the solution is 2. 2 real solutions. The question is about, is it rational or irrational? How to know?
Rational. Take the square root.
this will be under the square root, it will be 8.
Yes.
But we have a problem here. So it will be rational. No, don't say that. Be careful. This is the trick. Now, there is a theorem, by the way. It was in the old textbook. It says if all the coefficients are integers, and the discriminant is perfect square, by the way, 64 is perfect square because its square root is 8, then the solutions will be rational. But forget about that. Now, what you need to do if you want to know that they are rational or not, just you need to find the solutions by the quadratic formula. It is negative b plus or minus the square root of what? D, the discriminant, over 2a. So it is what? It is negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 64 over 2 times a. It is 2 square root of 7. Now you have two solutions. What they are? Negative 6 plus or minus plus 8 over 2 square. Let me continue here. It is negative 6 plus or minus 8 over 2 square root of 7. From here we have two solutions. The first solution is what? Negative 6 plus 8 over 2 square root of 7, which is what? Which is 2 over 2 square root of 7, which is 1 over square root of 7. Of course, if you rationalize it, it will be square root of 7 over 7, which is irrational. Clearly, also this one will be negative 14 over 2 square root of 7, which is what? Negative 2, negative 7 over square root of 7, which is negative square root of 7 if you rationalize. Right? So both, of course, are irrational solutions. That's it, ya shabab. Thank you and see you, inshallah.